Hey everyone, it's Mariana, and I am back with another Game of Thrones episode recap and review. I know you might be wondering what happened to my episode 3 video, and let me just assure you, I am working on it. I didn't want to do another recap for that one because I didn't see much point in recapping a battle, so I'm taking a slightly different approach to that one, and it's taking me a bit longer than I thought, but I do expect to have that video for you by the end of this week, so hopefully it's going to be worth the wait and you're going to see it very, very soon. Let's talk about this latest episode though. All kinds of spoilers coming up for Season 8, Episode 4. The Last of the Starks. Episode 4 was an interesting experience to say the least. I was watching it and I could just tell how mixed the feedback was going to be because a lot of people really have not been into the whole setup and transitional and character-driven type of episodes this season, which kind of surprises me because that is a big part of Game of Thrones. At least it was a big part of Game of Thrones in the earlier seasons. It also makes sense for this episode to be transitional because we just got out of a huge battle and we're about to get into another one in episode 5, so it was definitely necessary to dedicate an episode to establishing where the surviving characters stand and what their plans and allegiances are, but I don't know if it was necessary to spend an hour and 15 minutes on this. Here's the thing. I am actually a big fan of character-driven episodes. I've mentioned this before, but I love watching these characters just sit around and talk and plan and scheme and verbally spar, whatever it is they are doing that doesn't involve huge plot points. And that is, as I mentioned, what a lot of earlier seasons of Game of Thrones revolved around. There was a lot of scheming, a lot of politics, a lot of foreshadowing. The problem is most of this great dialogue in earlier seasons came from the books. So once the show outpaced the books, as much as the writers try their best, and sometimes they do nail it, sometimes they do write great character moments, but for the most part, these dialogue heavy and setup type episodes just can't carry the show as well as they used to be able to. Obviously, I loved episode 2 of this season, and even with the weaker episodes, I still find them very much enjoyable. By no means do I think that the show is actually bad, but this episode is a prime example of how this could have been presented better. Even this small detail of Jon releasing ghosts and sending him away with the wildlings could have been framed as something more important. It could have been a scene that signified Jon letting go of his identity as the bastard of Winterfell and embracing his newfound heritage as the Targaryen heir, or something. Do something interesting with it. I'm not a writer, but this scene just seemed kind of like a throwaway moment of the writers telling us, here's Ghost, he's leaving, stop complaining about him not being a big part of the show. But let's start at the beginning. We open with this somber goodbye to all of those who died in the battle for Winterfell, and I have to say, I thought this was one of the strongest scenes in the episode. Jon delivering his speech really worked for me. It seemed very honest. You could hear Kit Harington getting choked up a bit, and it was just great. Also, the moment when Sansa puts that Stark pin on Theon, that was just beautiful and so sad and powerful. I think they really nailed it with the goodbyes here, while also efficiently showing just how big their losses are. Then we move into the feasting, which understandably doesn't quite start out in a very celebratory mood, but once Dany legitimizes Gendry, naming him a Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, everyone's spirits seem to start to lift. This was kind of an odd attempt at gaining Westerosi allies by Daenerys, and as awkward as that was, I think it was meant to be awkward, to be honest. She is not a politician, she is a conqueror, and she is met with this wall of established loyalties in Westeros that she doesn't quite know how to get through. In this case, Gendry is a nobody, and legitimizing him may potentially gain her a loyal lord in the future, but at this point in time, let's be realistic, nobody in this room was invested or personally cared about Gendry's fate, so this was kind of an odd situation, but to her, she has to start somewhere. I did love the looks between Dany and Sansa here. You just know what's going through their minds because of that "what about the North" question they never really addressed in episode 2. Of course, later in this episode, Sansa is handed the perfect solution to the northern problem when she finds out Jon has the better claim to the throne, and there is no way she was about to keep that to herself when a way to remove Dany from this equation presented itself. This was generally a rough episode for Dany. Even after losing half of her army as she was helping in the fight against the Night King, she is still not accepted by the Northerners. Jon is struggling with the concept of incest. She loses another dragon. Poor Rhaegal, that dragon death was brutal. Which, by the way, I am really annoyed she didn't even attempt to burn Euron's fleet. I get that there were a lot of scorpions around, but can someone clarify if she was just out of range of these ships or what? Because I just don't see why she didn't try to go behind them or something, because by the time they reloaded, she could have made it behind the ships and tried to light them on fire. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. But as I was saying, her ships are destroyed and Missandei is beheaded. Not to mention everything that Tyrion and Varys are talking about, which she isn't even aware of yet. This season just has not been treating her well, and I'm not surprised by it, to be honest, because I have mentioned my thoughts on her chances of actually becoming the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. I think they're pretty low. But it still sucks for her, and this whole inevitable turn for Mad Queen that I'm pretty sure is about to happen isn't really unreasonable considering how much she keeps losing. She's made mistakes in the past that definitely seemed like her Targaryen madness side was getting in the way of her judgment, but in this case, I'm kind of on her side, and the whole burn them all thing seems like the only option at this point. Unless she's going to try to take Jon out, at which point I will be very upset with her and definitely not on her side, which this kind of has me concerned in general, especially after he went behind her back and against her wishes and still told Arya and Sansa about his true identity. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Sansa is going to take that opportunity and go with it. Plus, it is a little bit concerning how many parallels the show is drawing between Jon Snow and Ned Stark this season. Even Sansa says something along the lines of, "The men in my family don't do well when they go south." I don't remember exactly what she says, but something along those lines, which is a callback to a line in earlier seasons. I will say that Dany's motivations seem a bit unclear to me. She kept saying that she was fighting Jon Snow's war because she loves him, and this episode, when she comes to talk to Jon, she keeps making it sound like her motivation for asking him to keep his true name a secret is love, but we know her goal is the throne, and the reason she doesn't want people to know Jon is an option is because he has a better claim and because people like him more. This is not to say she should give up her throne for him, not at all, but I'm just questioning why her words are kind of going against the motivations she has had this entire time, and we know she still has. And speaking of confusing motivations, let's talk about Jaime, shall we? First of all, let me just say I loved all of the Jaime and Brienne stuff in this episode. Again, starting with a drinking game between Jaime, Brienne, Pod, and Tyrion, that was great, and seeing all of them happy was just the best thing. Then, of course, when Jaime and Brienne are alone together, this is a relationship I've been rooting for since the bath scene in season 3, especially considering how much chemistry the actors have with each other every time they're on screen together. So, all of this was wonderful, but we know happiness doesn't last on Game of Thrones, so let's talk about Jaime leaving. For a long time, my interpretation of Jaime's character arc direction was that he was going to end up killing Cersei, and I still believe that that's where he is headed. What makes me think this in this episode is that he fully intended to stay at Winterfell with Brienne, and Benioff and Weiss confirmed this in the behind-the-scenes interviews. What makes him leave is the news about the fallen dragon and the destroyed fleet and everything that's happening between Cersei's and Dany's forces. So, to me, that sounds like he's going to put an end to this shit. Now, Brienne's interpretation of the situation is that he is going back to Cersei, potentially in an attempt to save her. But the problem is, Jaime neither confirms nor denies this. How easy would it have been for him to say, I'm going to put an end to this? That's all he needed to say. The dialogue in this scene is vague, with him recounting every awful thing he's done for Cersei and how he's not a good person. He's a hateful person, just like her. My interpretation of this is that the writers are just trying to throw the viewers off by making them think that he is going to King's Landing to be with Cersei or protect Cersei, when in reality he is actually going back to his Kingslayer ways, or Queenslayer in this case, and is going to actually take her out. I am honestly surprised by how many people think that this is a real arc reversal for Jaime, and to be honest, if that is the case, I am going to be pretty annoyed, because that would be some bullshit. My money has always been on him killing her and fulfilling that Valonqar prophecy. Or there is still a way we can make that Azor Ahai prophecy fit if he ends up ending the war by stabbing her with a sword. So here's where we stand by the end of this episode. Despite of what it looked like in episode 3, somehow only half of Dany's army and half of the Northern army is gone. Dany's fleet is in very bad shape. Only one dragon remains. Qyburn's scorpions clearly work as a defense system against the dragons, and Cersei has a fresh army, so their forces are pretty equal. Varys is having some serious doubts about Dany being the best choice for ruler, and says he will serve the realm no matter the cost. Tyrion is in denial about his doubts. He thinks that she will make good choices somehow. He is probably going to come around to Varys' side once Dany starts burning people. Jaime is headed to King's Landing to hopefully kill Cersei, and so is Arya, which kind of makes me concerned about Arya, because I think this is how she might die. The Hound is clearly headed for Clegane Bowl, and Bronn negotiated himself a better deal. I told you guys, he's still after getting paid. He has no issue killing the Lannister brothers if needed. Cersei is being smart here, playing political games, telling the people the usurper, aka Daenerys, is coming and welcoming them to the Red Keep for protection. But obviously, really, she wants to shield herself with the innocent people that Dany would have to kill to get to Cersei. Also, as we suspected, she's going to pass off her child as Euron's child, and she pretty much thinks that things are looking good for her, which they kind of are. She had no plans to surrender to Dany, and she executed Missandei. Unfortunately, I was actually pretty sad about that one, but Missandei's last words were Dracarys, and that might as well have been an invitation for Dany to burn them all, as the Targaryens say. Personally, I will not be surprised if things go really, really badly for a while for our favorite characters next episode, so we might actually be getting the death toll we all expected from episode 3. get your tissues ready. Oh, and Gilly is confirmed pregnant, in case that mattered to anyone. So obviously a lot of things happened this episode, and even though it was a transitional episode for the most part until the last bit with Cersei, it still was an eventful episode. The writers could have found a better way to go about all of this, and I think the episode definitely could have been shorter, but overall, I think when you watch the entire season from the first episode until the last, it will work a lot better than just watching these things from week to week. I enjoyed the episode, as I mentioned it. It's not one of my favorites, but I think it had some really, really, really good moments. As always, I would love to know what you guys thought about the episode. What were your favorite parts? What were your least favorite parts? And what do you think is going to happen in episode 5? I'm not going to do any death predictions because it's kind of all up in the air at this point. If I were forced to predict some deaths, obviously Cersei and Euron. I think Daenerys might be a goner, but I'm not sure if that would be this coming episode or in episode 6. I think Jaime is unfortunately going to die. Characters like Pod probably going to die. Grey Worm, I don't know. I don't think Grey Worm is going to die. I think he's going to be poor, lonely Grey Worm for the rest of the show, but we'll see. I don't know. I think there are a few different ways this could go, but I am pretty positive that Jon is going to be the one on the throne, as I have suspected for a while now. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!